powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL Week 5. The time flies when you're having a good time around these parts. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. Again, this is the perfect time to remind all of you, our loyal listeners, FanDuel.com/bet-the-board. Go over to FanDuel, check out all of their great new user signups and incentives, whether it's enhanced odds, whether it's spread the love campaigns, or $1,000 free bets to get you into the action. FanDuel has you covered every which way you look. And Payne, you know, it's a little bittersweet with Major League Baseball playoffs fully getting underway today and our beloved Yankees already on the golf course for the season.
I don't talk about baseball once the Yankees get eliminated. But I knew you would bring it up.
Well, I just want to know if you want Cashman out.
This is your chance. You want Cashman out? Come in.
You want Boone out? I mean, what are you doing if you're over there at Hank Steinbrenner to right the ship?
I'm pretending like I run the Yankees and I have a paycheck and I have money and I can actually go and get a center fielder and a left fielder and a shortstop. This was really nothing more than a byproduct of the sun being a cheap ass. So there we are.
See, that's all we need.
There's your rant.
We needed a quick 30-second rant to get it off your chest, and we can now close the book on the Fall Classic and everything else and focus on football, where we've been making all of our money for listeners so far this season. Best bets off to a good start. Reads on point last weekend. 5 big games on the docket this week. But before we get into all of that, wanted to get your quick takeaways on what you saw unfold Monday night with the Chargers taking care of business against the Las Vegas Raiders.
Pretty much the same thing that we've seen throughout the course of the season. Justin Herbert playing out of his mind. I know it's a game we'll talk a little bit about later when the Browns visit the Chargers. But that's basically an offense that is living and dying on Justin Herbert. Nothing great is going on there schematically. Just a lot of talent overcoming some of the coaching of Joe Lombardi. I thought we anticipated some regression coming in from the Raiders there. Not really a matchup for their offense that bodes well. Some issues along the offensive line, not able to take advantage of the light boxes of the Chargers in the ground game. And then you have an offense that Gruden has wanted to be a little bit more explosive over the years, and he's gotten Carr to buy into that philosophy. And that's really what the Chargers defense prevents. They play a shell, they prevent the big stuff, and they want you to throw it short. And I don't think Carr was accurate enough. I don't think he had enough time. And so ultimately we saw what we thought the offense could be. They've been overachieving. I don't see a ton of talent on that offense. There is serious questions on the inside of the Raiders offensive line. You're starting a center that isn't a natural center. You even lost a guy like Denzel Good for the season. I just don't like that offensive line in its parts, especially up the middle. The ground game is not working. It's basically Darren Waller. And I don't think we've really seen the receivers at their young age be guys that you can count on for consistency. Brian Edwards shows up here and there. Henry Ruggs has been a little bit better this year, but still has some lapses and isn't really the polished route runner to be as consistent as they need him to be. So it's really a flawed offense, and we kind of made a point of that it was an offense that was living and dying on a great game plan, on a great script, and Derek Carr playing out of his mind.
Well, it's a team as well that had their win total pegged at 7. They obviously exceeded expectations out of the gates. We'll see how the market responds. With the test this weekend against the Chicago Bears, it will not make our 5 big game breakdowns, but a fascinating contest nonetheless. The Bears have finally elected to name Justin Fields QB1. Matt Nagy, not quite sure what's going on there, Payne, in Chicago, when he goes, Andy Dalton's our quarterback if he's healthy. Within 24 hours, we haven't seen an about face from a head coach in the National Football League since Doug Peterson, Week 17 of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Matt Nagy really has no idea what he's doing. And you tweeted last week. Believe it was Friday. About Matt Nagy not announcing his starting quarterback. And I chimed in the tweet and I said, this is the first brilliant thing that he's done, is not divulging which one of his quarterbacks would be starting because they are so polar opposite, making them game plan for Fields and or a Nick Foles or Andy Dalton was actually very smart. And then all of a sudden everyone chimed in, right? If they're going to run the same offense. And I couldn't really respond to people saying, I don't know if they're going to run the same offense, because what ended up happening was Bill Lazor called plays that game. So the offense looked drastically better, as it did when he took over play calling duties last year. And just very smart what he did. He'd gone a little extra tempo. He used some six-man protections, and he has Justin Fields throwing the ball deep down the field off one read, which is really one of his best attributes, is the deep ball. Now, he's without Montgomery this week, and so you wonder if the down-to-down efficiency will be there against the Raiders. But ultimately, this was the decision to make. This was the move to make, especially when you have a pass rush of the Raiders that has been getting home. You want the more mobile quarterback, but at least the Bears at this point have the better play caller, have the quarterback under center that provides a higher ceiling. There are going to be some woes and some issues. It's not going to be perfect from Justin Fields. He still isn't a guy that throws with great anticipation, which is what he's going to be required to do this week against the Raiders defense. But he's certainly going to be able to up the level of explosiveness, and it looks like Darnell Mooney is really coming on as a number 2 weapon alongside Allen Robinson.
I know every Bear fan not just excited to see Justin Fields, but to see the two-headed monster in the backfield of Damian Williams along with Virginia Tech and Kansas product Khalil Herbert toting the rock. Should be an interesting game here in our backyard as the Raiders could potentially come back to earth, and we'll see exactly what the Bears have in their supposed franchise quarterback. But you know what, Payne? When you look at the NFC North, one of the Bears' most bitter rivals in that division, we know who their franchise quarterback is. And it's the Green Bay Packers going out on the road to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. Green Bay, a field goal favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. This total has been on the climb from as low as 48.5 up to 51.5. Both defenses rank top 5 in fewest yards per attempt. Common denominator they both played, and partly why their numbers have been buoyed this year, is indeed the Pittsburgh Steelers. You look at Zach Taylor, 4-24-1 straight up his first 29 games as head coach, suddenly experiencing a touch of prosperity, 5-2 over the last 7 games. And when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, we saw glimpses of what this offense could be in the second half last Thursday night against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Joe Burrow looking much more comfortable stepping into throws. This is a guy who finished 17 of 20 for 253 yards and 2 touchdowns in that comeback against Jacksonville. He's got a task at hand against the Green Bay defense that may be living a little bit on reputation. The Bengals appear to be a team that can have some success on paper with the aerial assault.
I agree. And I think there's some uncertainty with how that side of the ball will play out from a game script perspective. Zach Taylor's been really run heavy, especially on early downs, 55% run rate on first down. You wonder if that changes if Joe Mixon doesn't play. I would keep an eye on today's practice report there. He missed yesterday. It sounds like it's really trending towards being extremely iffy and him not being out there, but today is telling, and I know Joe Mixon is really tough. So watch that injury report. Green Bay hasn't been able to stop the run, and on first down, even worse, 21st in run stop efficiency. The problem is, if it's not Joe Mixon and it's Pirine, you'd hope Zach Taylor doesn't just run for the sake of running. Pirine last season had a rushing success rate 9% below average. You would think with T. Higgins looking like a go for Sunday and Jair Alexander down, Kevin King also working his way back from a concussion, that this would be, as you kind of alluded to, a Joe Burrow passing game script. You would think that is what's going to be written here, so to speak. Burrow's done a really good job pushing the ball downfield, even though he had some issues early in the season with some uncertainty stepping into throws, and it's to be expected, right? I mean, he had major knee surgery. The interior of the offensive line isn't great, but 9.2 yards per pass attempt right now. I think he probably will rein some of that in against the Packers because they play this shell secondary designed to keep everything in front. But that'd be the game plan for me. Attack a Packers secondary that's played Jameis Winston, Goff and Weather, Jimmy G and Big Ben, and is somehow 20th in defensive pass efficiency and is now playing without its best corner and one of the league's best corners. Kenny Clark has to be a disruptor for the Packers defense to have a little bit of a chance. He's been coming on a little bit, started slow, now tied for the 4th most pressures among interior linemen. That is, again, where the Bengals are most vulnerable. You have Trey Hopkins, the Bengals starting center. He is 30th in pass blocking grade among qualifiers. He's also dealing with an injury. The Bengals' 2 starting guards, Payne and Suafilo, they're both dealing with some injuries as well, and both grade outside the top 50 in pass blocking among guards. Jackson Carmine, the kid from Clemson that they drafted this year, hasn't fared really much better at all when they've put him in that spot.
Because he was
Kenny
overdrafted.
Clark has to be the guy. Yes, he was really overdrafted. That is a prop that we lost.
Don't get me started.
I mean, it was interesting, right? You go out early in the second round and draft a guy that nobody had going really in the first 3+ rounds, and you were kicking him inside to guard when he played left tackle. It was just really a big reach. I understand they wanted to address the offensive line, but
only
Clark.
Only the Raiders are supposed to make moves like that, Payne. Overdrafting players from Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson 2 rounds earlier than anybody else had them projected.
That is very true. So, when you look at some of the issues, right, the one Smith brother is out, the other one is battling an injury and is questionable for this game. It's got to be on Kenny Clark to provide some of that rush, and coming from their interior probably is a little bit helpful. So he's got to dominate that matchup for the Packers defense to, really have a chance here, I think. Now, what's interesting is the line movement in this total. And it would kind of depict the game script being a quick pass attack for Burrow, a lot of empty sets. This was actually a total, Todd, that we looked at and we were hoping to go over if it opened 48. But first thing Monday, the total was 49.5. Now, a well-respected bettor did steam this thing up, shot through the key of 51. We're out to 51.5, 52 right now. I'll be candid. What gave us hesitation at 49.5 was the pace. Cincinnati's 31st in neutral situation pace. They're 31st in first half pace. Green Bay's 27th in first half pace. In neutral situations, both teams are below average in pass rate. So this is one that I am going to watch closely, and I'm just intrigued to see what this total does, because at 52, it wouldn't shock me if there is a differing of opinions, knowing that the Packers like to keep things in front, knowing that Jesse Bates is going to return for the Bengals defense, knowing that the pace is extremely slow and both teams don't mind running. It will be interesting to see if we do see a difference of opinion here at 52 now, and there's some under money that potentially leaks into the market now.
Well, you mentioned the Bengals defense, and I think that provides the perfect opportunity to address that side of the ball. When you look at Jesse Bates, he, of course, didn't play against Jacksonville on a short week. His full return was never really in question for this coming weekend. Chidobe Awuzie, he's a little bit more tenuous, but you look at the way the Bengals have performed so far, and their linebackers are getting a lion's share of the credit. Logan Wilson creating a name for himself, the talented linebacker out of Wyoming. First player in NFL history with 40 tackles and 3 picks through the first 4 games. And when you look at PFF's grade, they have the third best linebacking core, with 3 players all ranking in the top 25 when you look at Davis Gaither and Jermaine Pratt. Meanwhile, for Cincinnati, the key, as we know, against Aaron Rodgers is their ability to manufacture pressure. It's an area where they haven't been elite by any stretch of the imagination. Do you think they're able to get after Rodgers, knowing that even with a makeshift offensive line, he hasn't appeared to be under duress over the last couple of games?
That's the big question. Now, the other element we have to this game is that the Bengals defense is making a huge step up in class. And we all expected, I think, the Bengals defense to be improved just based upon the dollars they've spent the last 2 off seasons. I mean, this may shock some people, but Cincy right now, 3rd most expensive defensive line, 3rd most expensive secondary, and the aforementioned Jesse Bates, one of the league's best safeties, is looking for a new deal. And then you mentioned the increased play from the linebackers. That is really the place where they decided and elected to go cheap with young talent, and that young talent is outperforming the contracts right now. Now, the Bengals through 4 weeks, 5th in defensive efficiency, 5th in first down defensive efficiency. Everything seems great, but they've had some issues getting pressure. 25th in pass rush win rate, 26th in pressure rate. That's the one thing, to your point, that's really hindered Aaron Rodgers this season. It is pressure. And the schedule of offenses and quarterbacks the last 3 weeks, I mean, it's Andy Dalton in a game with wind. It's Big Ben. It's Trevor Lawrence. 3 offenses all outside the top 25 in efficiency, and yet the Bengals are just average in EPA per dropback allowed. It tells me that there's some regression coming for the Bengals defense. Could be as early as this week, although it is a little bit of a sleepy spot for the Packers. Obviously, a big step up in class here against a top 10 Packers offense and Aaron Rodgers. The best since he's faced so far this season is Minnesota in Kirk Cousins, who's 14th in efficiency. That game, Kirk Cousins finished with an 89% adjusted completion percentage, 7.2 yards an attempt. And they basically just got in their own way with early penalties. 24 points scored the final 36 minutes of regulation for the best offense that the Bengals have faced this year in Minnesota. One of the matchups that I would keep an eye on here is Aaron Jones catching balls out of the backfield. Jones is, although in the doghouse after fumbling, and A.J. Dillon got some reps and basically a blowout running between the tackles last week, but I think you'll see more Aaron Jones this week. He's run routes on 55% of the Packers' dropbacks, 12th most among running backs, and right now, since he's allowed 32 receptions to running backs in 4 games, tied for the second most. The linebackers have played pretty well, but they have also given up some receptions to running backs. So that's one of the matchups I would look for. And then again, it just basically comes down to, can the Bengals apply pressure? They haven't really been able to do that. Maybe they have a chance here against a Packers front 5 that is a little bit beaten and banged up. I know Elkington Jenkins is questionable for this game. They thought he might have a chance to play. That would be a big bonus here for the Packers if he's able to suit up.
Should be an interesting game. A variety of factors contributing. Is Cincinnati ready to make that next step? And as you kind of mentioned there, a sleepy spot for the Green Bay Packers, who could be going into battle without arguably their most valuable defender and one of the league's most underrated players amongst casual fans, of course, being lockdown corner Jair Alexander. From Cincinnati, we'll head out to the West Coast, Payne and SoFi Stadium, where it's the Los Angeles Chargers playing host to the Cleveland Browns, a pair of 3-1 teams to start the season. And you're looking at the Chargers, a modest 1.5, 2-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on this game is down a touch from the open. We're looking at 47, more or less painted across the board at this point. And when you look at the Chargers, they've done nothing wrong in the eyes of bettors over their last 8 games, going 7-1 straight up, 7-1 against the spread, and they've been spurred on by a defense holding their opponents to less than 20 points per game during that stretch. But the one thing we've come to know about the Chargers, you bet on them when they go on the road, you bet against them when they play at home. 12-21-1 against the spread in their own building, 9-17-1 against the spread as a home favorite. What's even more interesting when you look at some of the parameters there, 2-7-1 against the spread at home versus previous year playoff teams. Why do I give you all that information? It's just fun to talk about. It won't impact what goes on the field. When you're looking at the Cleveland Browns offensively, I was a little bit surprised, and we talked off air, that reports of Baker Mayfield dealing with a left shoulder injury circulated this morning. I didn't think that was news to anybody by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess in the wake of going 15 for 33 against the Minnesota Vikings, you want to try and fabricate an excuse. But I'll make the case the reason the Browns passing game has hit the skids over the last couple weeks is because Baker's operating without a security blanket in Jarvis Landry, and for whatever reason doesn't appear to be on the same page as Odell Beckham Jr. Thankfully for the Browns, though, this should be all about the two-headed monster in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt against the Chargers' lowly run defense.
No. You just give Ian Rappaport a few bucks and hope that he can pump this line to 3 so you can take the Browns at that key there.
I mean, if that's what it takes, we can always be able to make that happen.
Questionable if that's the case or not. Anyways, when you look at this side of the ball, is Brandon Staley to some extent going to switch up what he does defensively to defend Cleveland, right? We just broke down the Chargers game on Monday night, so this is probably going to be a little repetitive, but Staley's defense welcomes you to run. His philosophy is very simple. If you want to do the less efficient thing, go for it. Right? You're going to have to go 12 plays without committing a penalty or having a miscue or turning it over. The Chargers have been playing with a light box on 67% of snaps this season. Teams are averaging 6.5 yards a rush, and 81% of those runs into the light box have graded successful. 42% of the yards Brandon Staley's Charger defense has given up through 4 weeks have come on the ground. So if Staley's going to go with that exact approach, I think you're going to see Kevin Stefanski and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They're all going to be licking their chops because the Browns are going to go heavy formation. They're going to go to 2 and 3 tight end sets. Stefanski's used those personnel groupings on 41% of snaps this season. If Staley decides to commit to the box, then the Browns probably run from 3 wide sets. And the Chargers have been far worse defending runs from that formation, shockingly. 69% success rate, 6.2 yards a carry. Teams are averaging when the Chargers defense is facing 11 personnel. Either way, I mean, the Browns are going to take what the Chargers give them on the ground. There's going to be no surprise. There's going to be no shock here. Like, the Browns' goal is to run the football. That's how they're built. Now, when it is time to throw, Baker needs to be better. That was ugly last week, 15 for 33. Completion percentage, 14% below expectation. Only 33% of his passes grade successful. I know Baker's playing through the shoulder injury, but it's nothing large enough to struggle that much last week. He was just off. He missed wide open guys. You could actually see it in his rhythm. You could see it in, he got more happy feet. He likes to kind of just pound the ground a little bit. And he just wasn't in form. He wasn't getting the ball out in time. That was the bigger issue. It wasn't the shoulder injury on the opposite side of his throwing arm, right? So that'll be interesting to see how that matches up. And to your point, the Browns receiver group isn't anything that's elite. And I think that probably is a perception from the outside public, right? Because Odell Beckham Jr. used to be awesome, and he's flashy and flamboyant and has blonde hair, and he's awesome, right? Like right now, he's been 34% below an average receiver in terms of his value. And you have Jarvis Landry out. And Peoples-Jones is at least metrically their best receiver, and that was a guy who underwhelmed in college. You have Schwartz, who at this point is a deep threat. I mean, the receiver group isn't great. And so the Chargers secondary certainly has an edge there. They've been elite, 4th in defensive pass efficiency, and they've played the likes of Dak, Mahomes, and Derek Carr. Clear downgrade and class drop for the Chargers secondary going against Baker. So I would love to see how Staley elects to defend here. Does he come out and throw a curveball and see if he makes Baker beat him? And now that's something that he hasn't really done in the past, commit more guys to the box. But I think it would be smart here to force Baker to beat me a little bit more than just saying, hey, I'm going to sit in a light box and I'm going to let you pick up 6.5 yards a carry, because Stefanski's the guy that has no issues on 2nd and 9 picking up 6.5 yards. He's the guy on 3rd and 8 that has no issues picking up 6.5 yards, and because he's analytically driven, is going to go for it on 4th and 1 or 4th and 1.5. So that's what's the most intriguing thing to me about this game is, will Brandon Staley adjust and adapt just enough to not make this a full-blown stampede over his defense with the Browns' run game?
Well, if you're intrigued to watch that side of the ball, I'm intrigued to see what unfolds when Justin Herbert matches up against one of the league's more unheralded defenses. And when you look at the Cleveland Browns, finding a bit of a swagger on that side of the ball, allowing just 13 total points the last 2 weeks, and people can say what they want. Oh, it was Justin Fields at home against Cleveland. The reality of it, what the Browns did last week against a white-hot Vikings offense should have opened everyone's eyes. Only 2 opponent drives in the last 23 have reached their red zone. You look at their run defense this season, top 3 in both yards per carry and yards per game allowed. Myles Garrett, 2nd in the league in quarterback pressures behind just Max Crosby. Browns 2nd in the league behind only the Patriots for overall pressure rate. You look at these defensive backs who could make up a college All-American All-Star team, finally realizing some of their potential in the back. We're curious to see if Greg Newsome will be available, the first-round pick out of Northwestern, matched up against the Chargers offense that looked to hit a little bit of a rough patch for stretches against the Raiders, but still was able to hang 28 points, largely behind Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler. When you look at this particular matchup, Payne, who gets the edge, the Chargers offense or what we've seen from Cleveland on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think it's a great litmus test for both. The Chargers have played the 4th easiest schedule of defenses. The Browns have played a below-average schedule of offenses. What Cleveland's doing defensively, I don't think is a shock to either of us. We called for massive improvement in year 2 under Joe Woods with the bodies they added in free agency and the draft, and with simple improved injury luck. You also have a Chargers offense that I've continued to preach isn't quite what people think it is, despite the stud quarterback and the talent, because Joe Lombardi isn't allowing the offense to operate at peak right now. And so you put those two factors together, and this is why the under was buried Tuesday when this game reopened at 48.5, and it's now below that key of 47 to 46.5. Justin Herbert right now has the 9th lowest intended air yards. Again, this offense is kind of mimicking what the Saints did with, 40-something-year-old Drew Brees with a slew of injuries. And this past Monday, 5.2 yards per pass attempt with just 2 explosives against the Raiders. It's an offense that either runs on first down or passes extremely short of the sticks to the point where the Chargers remain poor in first down efficiency, just 22nd. And that's never been a byproduct of future success and predictive success moving forward when you're that shabby on first down. And so this basically is the Justin Herbert bail us out of jail show on 3rd and 4th down. And that's where the Chargers offense basically skyrockets. They're top 5 in efficiency on 3rd and 4th down. Herbert's got a 53% passing success rate on the 3rd and the 4th down money downs, and 7.6 yards a pass attempt combined on those 2 critical downs. So you're hoping, and this is why I just haven't thrown in the towel yet. The Chargers are obviously 3-1. They're getting all the hype. They got a great quarterback. They got a ton of talent. And I'm just like, man, just operate at like half of peak, and this offense may, dare I say, go on a Super Bowl run. But it's like Joe Lombardi right now has just not been good. And I think it's being glossed over because the Chargers are just loaded with talent, and they're 3-1, and Brandon Staley likes to go for it on 4th down, and everyone thinks he's a wizard, despite those decisions to go for it are like ABC 1, 2, 3 paint by number. It's just like this weird team that I can't really grasp right now. Now in this matchup, like, let's see if the Chargers O-line can hold up. Herbert, could be under pressure here. Rashawn Slater's been as good as advertised, but you have Storm Norton and you have Matt Filer. They've been liabilities in pass protection. And Corey Linsley, while great run blocking so far this season, hasn't been himself in pass protection. And all told, that's a Chargers offensive line that's 24th in pass rush win rate. Now you get a Browns defense, right, a front that really likes to create chaos. They stunt, they run twists, they run a bunch of games. They try to get interior pressure on almost every snap. They prefer getting interior pressure than having their ends rush up the field. And so there's 4 guys along the Browns defensive line right now that are all ranking top 10 in pass rush win rate. So this could be a game where Justin Herbert is a little bit under duress, and God forbid the Browns win that first down matchup. It's going to be a little bit tougher this week, I think, when you look at the ability for the Browns to cover with their linebackers, and you look at a loaded secondary, and you look at Joe Woods' principles and schemes to have Justin Herbert bail you out on 3rd and medium and long all day.
Hey, it's one of those things that I think people oftentimes, they lose sight of the forest and the trees. And you've talked about it at great lengths with this Chargers team. They're getting by on just talent. If they can begin to scratch the surface as far as efficiency is concerned, they become even scarier. It's just a question of if they'll put it all together. You mentioned Storm Norton injury as well. Eventually, this team will get Brian Bulaga back, or so we're led to believe, along the offensive line. And we'll see if the Chargers can begin to really reach that potential. But a fascinating matchup nonetheless. The Browns, of course, playing their 2nd straight game on the road. The Chargers coming into this one on a bit of a short week for a non-divisional matchup. But within the division, and arguably the best from top to bottom within the National Football League, it's the San Francisco 49ers on the road against the Arizona Cardinals, where the 49ers are a 5.5-point underdog. Total in this game sits at 50 at FanDuel Sportsbook. This, of course, gives the 49ers a little bit level of increased familiarity, knowing that they played an extra abundance of games at State Farm last year when it was their home away from home. When you look at how the road team has performed last year alone, both road teams survived and advanced, so to speak, winning outright as dogs of 6 points or more. Meanwhile, Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, they lead the charge for the last remaining unbeaten team in the National Football League. These two have combined to go just 2-6 against the spread the last and 8 games, I should say, not the last 8, the 8 total, where they've been listed as a home favorite. Meanwhile, the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan, they struggle as a favorite. They excel as an underdog. Payne, I'm not going to bury the lead here. The biggest question for San Francisco, who will be the man taking snaps under center? Do we believe some of the subterfuge that it could be Jimmy Garoppolo, or does Trey Lance finally get to make his NFL starting debut?
I mean, I think there's a little gamesmanship here. I mean, again, going back to Jimmy G, and who knows his body better than him, he said in his post-game presser, I'm going to be out a few weeks. And so if we are to believe Jimmy G, he's going to be out a few weeks. And maybe, it's not just this game. I understand what reports leaked out Monday morning and that he may play, but I understand Kyle Shanahan also would like a defense to prepare for two because they're polar opposite quarterbacks. And so my instincts tell me that it could be Trey Lance, and I think that's probably how we operate. And I think there's also this idea that if Jimmy G isn't able to practice by, today, it's got to be Trey Lance because he's the one that's taking all the reps. That's the game plan that's being designed that's drastically different. Like, because you can't have Trey Lance unprepared, right? You can't have him operating Jimmy G's system Monday through Thursday. You need him operating Trey Lance's game plan. And so I think it's going to be Trey Lance. And whatever Trey Lance is at this very moment, Kyle Shanahan's going to get the most out of him. And I think there is the element of surprise at this point. I'm sure Kyle's been drawing up stuff since they drafted Trey Lance, waiting for this very moment. It's going to look different. And what we saw this past Sunday against Seattle in relief down double digits won't be what we see this week because they were playing catch-up in a game plan built for Jimmy G. There's no reason to show your hand down 14 against Seattle. I mean, line Trey up in shotgun and let him work on some of his deficiencies and make these live reps valuable for future success, even if they're going to lose that game. So I think you're going to see Trey Lance under center far more in this game. You're going to see the 49ers offense that most likely looks the same on virtually every snap. Shanahan's famous outside zone run. It's going to look like a replay all night. He's going to have boots and rollouts and play action off that wide zone concept. It's going to be handoffs. It's going to be Trey Lance keepers on the rollouts. There's going to be crossers and streakers for Lance to hit on those rollouts and boots. And then eventually, when the 49ers lull you to sleep, you'll get the throwback to a tight end or a fullback or a running back, and then they'll take a few calculated deep shots as well. And, I mean, I may get mud on my face if Trey Lance doesn't execute well here, but everything lines up for him to have a real shot at success in this matchup. I mean, all signs point to the 49ers being able to get their ground game going here. Arizona's 29th in rushing success rate allowed. They're dead last in explosive run defense. They're 19th in EPA per rush allowed. The wide zone run scheme has given them fits all season. They haven't figured out the formula on how to stop that, whether it was Tennessee running it, Minnesota, or even the Rams last week. Now, obviously, the game plan is a little different here. It should be geared towards making Trey Lance beat them. But the thing that we rave about and give Kyle Shanahan high praise for is he does all the things that make a quarterback's life easier, especially a young quarterback. He uses gobs of motion. There's tons of window dressing pre-snap. That helps all quarterbacks, not just young ones, right? And you have an Arizona defense that basically lives in cover one man. That's not really how you best defend a team with a mobile quarterback that runs lots of motion, has a ton of window dressing. So that's going to be interesting to see. And maybe Vance Joseph changes some things this week. He was with the Miami Dolphins. I know him very well in terms of his schemes. And so he basically, back in the day, lived in zone coverage. And then there's been this huge shift in philosophy. And maybe it's because of the talent. Maybe it's because of the players. But there's just been this seismic shift with the Cardinals playing man. And maybe they're better suited to do that. But I would think if Vance sees what's coming here, probably sprinkles in a little bit more zone. That's what I would do. That's his natural pedigree, and that probably would work better. So that is something to look for here. But if he executes how Arizona has played defensively all of last year and how they've performed this season through 4 games, I think the 49ers offense could have more success here than people are led to believe based upon the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about some of those defensive metrics against the run, and just even looking at the raw numbers for folks not as familiar with some of the terminology. I mean, the Vikings ran the ball for 177 yards and more than 6 yards per carry. The Jaguars more than 5 yards per carry and a shade under 160 yards. And even the Rams, who were playing from behind all afternoon long, were able to generate 5 yards per carry and north of 120 yards, a team that hasn't been able to find that consistent ground game. Byron Murphy on the Arizona defense also dealing with a bit of a rib injury. Says he's going to go, but you do wonder against a zone running team like this how eager he'll be to come down and help in run support as well, or match up with a physical wide receiver in the form of Deebo Samuel, who's really taken the league by storm.
He also played for what college? And where is that college located?
Oh, here we go. Hey, we're only 42 minutes into the podcast, and we're getting shots at the Pac-12.
I'm messing with you.
So, no, it's
Lead us, kind sir.
All right,
Promised land. Also, Graham Mertz upgraded along with Ferguson for the Wisconsin Badgers this week.
Big news for Wisconsin. They make 2 yards in a cloud of dust feel like an inventive offensive concept in 2021, given what they've subjected their fans and bettors to through the early portion of the season. But I digress. We may as well look at the other side of the ball, where Kyler Murray is clearly the lead bell cow for an explosive group. We've seen his odds to be offensive MVP come crashing down amid this torrid start. This is an Arizona offense cranking out 30-plus points per game, 400 yards of offense. And when you look at Kyler, he's the fourth player in NFL history with 75% completion rate and 300 passing yards through the first 4 games. He joins exclusive company by 3 soon-to-be Hall of Famers in Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning. But most impressively for Kyler Payne, I mean, he's 14 of 22 on throws of 20-plus air yards. And when you look at what this Arizona team has in spades, it's difference makers on the offensive side of the ball. Chase Edmonds, breakout performance last game. James Conner, we know, is a little bit more of a plodding back at this point. But they have a quartet of game breakers at the receiver position with DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, who's resurrecting his career, Christian Kirk, and, of course, the gadget guy of sorts, rookie Rondale Moore, that should be able to put some pressure and stress on a San Francisco defense. It's struggled for stretches so far this season.
Everything is clicking for the Cardinals offense, and it was again last week. 60% success on all plays, 11 explosives. Kyler Murray, to your point, the leader in the clubhouse for offensive MVP, he was on fire. 83% adjusted accuracy, completion percentage 7% above expectation, not a single turnover-worthy throw on his 39 dropbacks. But I'm interested to see if the Cardinals can follow that up. We thought it would be a sleepy spot for the Rams last week off the Super Bowl-like win against Tom Brady in Tampa the week prior. We've seen some of the highest highs for the Cardinals offense, but we've seen some very low lows as well. Had some struggles at Jacksonville. Should have lost outright at home to the Vikings. But obviously, your fear on this side of the ball, if you're San Francisco, is if the controlled pressure doesn't get home on Kyler, then what? Bosa, D. Ford, Armstead, they're a great trio along the defensive line, but right now, they're not creating a ton of pressure. San Francisco's 28th in pressure rate. The Cardinals' offensive line, although a few guys are playing through some injuries, 4th in pass block win rate. That's really been the secret sauce of success for Arizona's offense that no one's really talking about. It's, Kyler and it's the weapons, but the offensive line's been really good. If that pressure doesn't get to Kyler, or if Kyler is able to extend plays and buy time for receivers to get uncovered like he does so well, can the 49ers secondary hold up? Can you prevent the, heroics that Kyler's performing right now in 3rd and 4th and long? Right now, Arizona's 3rd in offensive efficiency in those 3rd and 4th and long situations. So it's amazing, right? Like, you can run crap offense on early downs and somehow the offense is just crushing on, in terrible situations as well. The series really is never over until it is. San Francisco, 18th in defensive pass efficiency, 18th in EPA per pass allowed. Now, they have dealt with some injuries to the secondary. We know Jason Verrett went down in week 1. You had Kwan Williams leave with a calf injury in the Packers game, missed last week. Mosley's missed some time. Norman's missed some time. Mosley did return last week, so that helps. He did an admirable job, I thought, in his first game back against DK and Lockett. Gave up 4 receptions on 8 targets to those guys. Did give up a 28-yarder to DK, but all in all, huge get back for them. Kwan Williams feels like a long shot to play. Josh Norman did return to practice in a light manner yesterday, but keep checking that injury report. The real hope, if you're the 49ers, is that your offense plays some level of keep away here, and that there's regression from Arizona's offense in their backyard style, because they do have a tendency to kind of play in spurts. And that there's also some positive pressure regression from the 49ers front, because they're winning their one-on-one battles when you look at pass rush win rate. But as a collective, again, they're not getting a ton of pressure. Now, I think as a bettor, you're always trying to put yourselves in the best positions possible. And I understand the glitz and the glam of Arizona, but last week this line was 1.5 on the look ahead at FanDuel. Over the summer, this was a pick'em. You can now get 6 minus 15. So we can talk about all the matchups, the X's and O's, but a price shift that large, it's tough to do anything but look one way here. And the first time they played last year, it was a 4-point game. The second time they played, San Francisco won with C.J. Beathard under center. Trey Lance is substantially better than C.J. Beathard. It's very tough beating the NFL by buying undefeated teams in the win-loss column at inflated prices. And so I would just kind of caution you there if you are banging the table to bet Arizona this week.
One last thing before we move on to the Sunday Nighter, Payne. What do you make of the total? Obviously, we saw this number open 53.5, but I think you kind of touched on it, talking about San Francisco's best hope for a successful game plan here is to play keep away, obviously shorten the game, and put together long drives that hopefully end in touchdowns if you're backing the 49ers in a spot like this.
Feel like I'm divulging a lot more information this year, and I'm sure that's a positive for the listeners. I don't necessarily feel overly comfortable with it, but this was a total that
You'll get a phone call later today. Don't worry about it.
Yes, this is a total that we circled that we were going to go on Monday morning and go under 53.5. That was kind of the thought process there. And then someone beat us to it. And it was a two-wave move. The initial move at 53.5, and then you had a second group come in and go under 51.5, 51 being a key. They were willing to take the second number, and that is why you're down to, 50 and 49.5. Then we started digging into the game, and I'm not necessarily sure San Francisco's offense is completely inept with Trey Lance here, and it would cause me some concern potentially going under the 49.5, which is the current price in the market. So I don't really have anything on this total, but that's really the story and the line history and the thought process behind this total over the last couple days.
Makes a ton of sense. A game that'll go a long way in terms of San Francisco finding themselves further behind the 8 ball in the division or right back in the thick of things despite their 2-2 start. Into the Sunday Nighter, Payne, clearly the crown jewel of NFL. Week 5, we get a rematch of the AFC Championship a season ago, and that sees Buffalo going right back to the scene of the crime at Arrowhead Stadium, where they'll take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now at FanDuel, you're looking at Kansas City, a 2.5-point favorite. You do have to lay a price on the home favorite there. Total in this game, the highest we've seen all season long to date, 57. Kansas City, we know the storylines. They failed to cover 6 straight regular season home games, but this will be the first time during that span that their opening is under a field goal favorite. When you look at Patrick Mahomes, he's thrived in this role. 8-1-1 against the spread in his career when not favored by more than 3 points. When you look at how Josh Allen has performed, this guy has been an ATS juggernaut. 29-16-2 overall, 11-1 against the spread the past 12 as far as regular season games are concerned. As an underdog, 14-6-2 against the number, 15-5-2 on the road. Buffalo's offense, well, they've passed tests in each of the last 3 weeks. Kansas City's defense, they're drawing the ire from a lot of defensive purists out there. But the biggest question here, Payne, let's look at Buffalo's defense. Yes, they've pitched 2 shutouts, but the strength of opposition nowhere close to what they're going to encounter in a pissed-off Kansas City Chiefs team on Sunday night.
This is going to be... Man, I can't wait for this game. There's so many things here that you can dig into and potentially uncover. And this might be one of the best games of the entire season. And so I'm chomping at the bit for it. I can't wait for Sunday Night Football. This is obviously Buffalo's Super Bowl, right? This is a game that they've circled, that they've built their team and added pieces on defense specifically to beat Kansas City. And initially I thought the line indicated that Buffalo might get over the hump, and then I remembered that this is really the same line, the opener of 3, was the one that they used in the playoff game last year. And so maybe the line didn't necessarily indicate Buffalo was the side. And I know there's been some early sharp money this week on Buffalo because there are folks that believe that these two teams are the same price on a neutral, and we're not giving 3 for home field anymore. And some folks even believe Buffalo might be -1 on a neutral. Part of the build-out of this new defense for Buffalo is increasing the natural pressure, right? Buffalo went out and they used money and they spent draft capital the last 2 seasons trying to acquire some pieces to get to Patrick Mahomes. And right now, Buffalo's second in pressure rate, despite blitzing at a below average rate. They use this foreign committee of sorts, like rotating Russo and Epinesa and Addison and Hughes. And no doubt that foursome's really improved the Bills' defense. And right now, they're number 1 in defensive efficiency, number 1 in first down efficiency. But they've also played 3 offensive lines this season that are 27th or worse in pass block win rate in Pittsburgh, Miami, and Houston. And the offenses that you see of Buffalo has built leads for the defense in 2 of those 3 games to the point where those pass rushers kind of just pin their ears back against bad offensive lines and just attack and not have the worry of defending run. So I do think there's some noise in Buffalo's pressure numbers. I've also said numerous times that I think there's predictive elements to games where you dismantle bad teams and exceed expectation. But Buffalo's played far and away the worst schedule in football. The best quarterback they've faced all season long is Taylor Heineke. The other 3 quarterbacks are a rookie in Davis Mills in weather for a West Coast kid, Jacoby Brissett, and Big Ben. So 3 backups and Big Ben turning 40 in a couple months. That's the quarterbacks Buffalo has faced. This is obviously a different animal here in Kansas City. And for all the demise talk that I have seen on social media and TV, and I don't know where it's coming from. Like, it must come from people that just the only sports they watch is flipping on SportsCenter, and they see a couple turnovers late, and it's like, man, Kansas City stinks. But the Chiefs' offense is absolutely humming right now. They're far and away the most efficient offense in the NFL. The gap in efficiency between Kansas City and the second best offense in the Rams is the same gap from the 7th most efficient offense to the 20th most efficient offense. I mean, they are playing so well right now, aside from the turnovers. Mahomes is like playing out of his gourd. Number 1 in QBR, number 1 in EPA per dropback, number 1 in points per possession. 56% of Mahomes' passes have gone for either a first down or a touchdown. Kansas City's retooled the entire offensive line. So that'll be like the narrative. It's like Buffalo went out and got pass rush to beat Kansas City. And it's like, well, Kansas City just retooled the entire offensive line and got 5 new guys. And so I think that's also a unit that's going to get progressively better as the year goes on, that Kansas City front, as they build chemistry and cohesion. It's literally 5 new guys. The positive is they'll likely be able to combat some of that Bills pressure. Tooney, Humphrey, and Smith, all top 8 in pass block win rate among interior linemen. Orlando Brown and Lucas Niang haven't performed to expectation yet. So if Buffalo is able to get pressure, it likely comes from the edge. But what's interesting is you see the build and the body types of those ends. It's 6'7", 330 for Niang. It's 6'8", 345 for Orlando Brown. You have to go around those guys, not through them. They struggle with the quicker edge rushers that have speed, and aside from Jerry Hughes, that's not the physical composition of Buffalo's pass rushers. They're bigger, not quicker ends. And so, again, this is a huge step up in class for Buffalo. You envision they'll do what they've always done, which is play too high shell. The Chiefs are far more efficient running the ball this season, so Edwards-Helaire should do really well here. Kelsey typically crushes this coverage by just finding soft spots in the zone and sitting in them. He doesn't necessarily run a route. He just sits in the open space. Now, maybe this strategy works for Buffalo. Force Kansas City to go 10, 12, 14 plays and hope the turnover bug continues to bite the Chiefs' offense. But that's really the only strategy that works to defend Kansas City, Todd.
Yeah, you mentioned Travis Kelce. Him and Tyreek Hill went on an absolute tear last year in the playoff game. They represented 290 of the 325 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes, 22 catches on 26 targets between them. We'll see what Buffalo can scheme up to at least neutralize one of them or mitigate some of the potential damage there. On the other side of the ball, Payne, I think a lot of people are panicked, of course, with Kansas City's defense. Chiefs are 31st in scoring defense, surrendering more than 31 points per game. We know the storylines. No team has made the playoffs, allowing 28-plus points since the St. Louis Rams in the greatest show on turf back in 2000. When you look at Kansas City, I mean, 31st not only in points per game, yards per game, last in yards per play allowed. And the Kansas City defense has allowed their opposition to get into the red zone 19 times this season, tied for the most in the NFL with the Washington football team. Meanwhile, Buffalo, we've seen their offense on full display. Josh Allen's completion percentage down year over year, but starting to feel more comfortable with the weapons. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen Buffalo look a little bit different on that side of the ball is a newly found ground game behind Devin Singletary and Zach Moss.
Yeah, they are playing a little differently this year. There's no doubt about that, but I do think the Bills' offense has to play better than its current form if this is a game where they're going to match scores. Buffalo hasn't been quite as potent on early downs this year as they were last season. And if you look at early downs the first three quarters, Josh Allen's 25th in EPA per dropback. Buffalo's number one in first down passing efficiency last year. They're 19th this season. So it's not only the percentage of first downs decreased in terms of throw rate by about 6%. It's actually the efficiency that's also dropped off the table. And it's forced them, to your point, to run a little bit more as teams go with light boxes to combat the 3 and 4 wide receiver sets and hyper aggressive pass rates. So, last year in the playoff matchup, what Kansas City did was they went to 6 defensive backs. They threw Juan Thornhill out there and played with one linebacker. Maybe this week that philosophy works again, and the one linebacker could be Willie Gay, who was activated and has practiced. We'll see. We'll want to monitor that situation, but getting your best linebacker back who can move sideline to sideline could certainly be a help in a game like this. But that's kind of the philosophy that Kansas City did use last year. And it'll be interesting to see if that's the look again Sunday night. I would expect, if that is the case, a little more running from Buffalo. I would expect maybe some heavier bunch sets from Dayball as well, more Dawson Knox getting involved. Buffalo has improved that part of the offense, and I think it was vital because you think about where Buffalo plays, and they want to be in postseason contention, and weather gets a little bit shoddy. And I know Josh Allen's a strong-arm quarterback. That was part of the appeal of Buffalo drafting him with potential weather games. But you also need to be able to run the ball. And right now, Buffalo's 13th in rushing efficiency, so some nice improvement there. There feels like a lot of variance on this side of the ball, right? Because Buffalo has regressed offensively. Kansas City has regressed defensively. But it's almost all the same parts on both sides. So you're just wondering, which one can kind of reclaim their form. And that will certainly go a long way. Everyone hates the Chiefs defense right now, just throw them in the trash. But this was a defense that was built to play with leads. It was one that was built to get after the quarterback because teams would have to throw to trailing games, if they were trailing. I'm not willing to throw in the towel yet on Kansas City's defense. I think they have a chance to go from league worst 32nd defensive efficiency to a team that flirts with the high teens when it's all said and done, and that's ultimately all you need when you have an offense of Kansas City's caliber. You couldn't have handpicked 2 worst matchups to start the season in Cleveland and Baltimore matchup-wise for the Chiefs defense. Then it's Justin Herbert and the Chargers, plus an Eagles offense that has a chance to be good when Nick Sirianni doesn't throw up all over himself. And there was clearly an added emphasis on being a little bit better offensively for Philadelphia than the show they put on Monday night against Dallas. They obviously have some weapons as well. They can run and pass. They have some options over the middle, which gives Kansas City's defense trouble. And they have a mobile quarterback. So it wasn't really shocking to see Philly have some level of success offensively. It's been a really tough schedule of offenses so far that the Chiefs have placed. And really, when you dig into it, it's not like it's just the schedules, right? There's some issues going on, and there's some problems for Kansas City's defense. They aren't getting natural pressure. They're 24th in pass rush run rate. Their pressure rate's 12th, but most of it is manufactured by Spags. Chris Jones has typically been a game wrecker in this matchup the last few seasons. The problem is they've moved him outside, and he's been a shell of himself coupled with this wrist injury he's dealing with. Frank Clark's been an absolute zero. But I think this comes down to which of these units really, most resembles their peak self. Brian Daboll also has to be willing, I think, to use Josh Allen's legs when the situation gets a little bit critical, right? When you're in the green zone or even midfield or these red zone situations, when those arise, like on third and fourth short yardage situations, like you got to get Josh Allen's legs into the mix. Sean McDermott has to learn from his issues last season. He needs to be more aggressive. In that playoff game, Buffalo had a 4th and 3 from the Kansas City 33. They kicked a field goal. They had 4th and goal from the KC 2, kicked a field goal. 4th and 3 from the KC 8, kicked a field goal. That can't happen this time if you think you're going into Arrowhead and beating Kansas City. It's just not going to happen.
One other thing to keep in mind here, underlying storyline, not to X's and O's, and I think people go, well, you're overreacting. It's only 5 games into the season. If Buffalo were to come out of this game with a victory, it would move their record on the season to 4-1. The Kansas City Chiefs would fall to 2-3, and it would essentially give Buffalo a 3-game advantage if we're talking about these two teams. And of course, they're not going to be the only ones in the mix, vying for home field advantage in that all-important number 1 seed, making the road to the Super Bowl go through their building. So I think that's worth mentioning as well, knowing that Kansas City may have to play like the slightly more desperate team, even if Buffalo wants to get revenge for what went awry last year in the postseason.
No doubt. And you also want to check that injury report. Russo and Milano.
Everybody's on there.
Yes. So I would pay attention to that because Matt Milano is one of the best cover linebackers in the league. Obviously, that will be vital against Kelsey. And Gregory Russo right now played the most snaps among those edge rushers, and just as a rookie. So he is also vital to the Bills' pass rush. What's interesting, though, is this line. And I kind of keep coming back to it. And I don't know why when I look at it, I'm shocked, although, again, it's the same line they used last year. But it's just kind of this perception that all is right with Buffalo and they're the best team in the league. And, again, they've dominated weak opponents. They've done exactly what they should be doing. But everyone seems, and it's almost like this approach to be super sharp, right? Like Kansas City isn't covering spreads. They're like the most popular team with the most popular quarterback, and the market's caught up to them. So we're going to like try to be uber sharp and just kind of piss on Kansas City. But the reality is, like, what is this line if the Chiefs don't blow an 11-point lead with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter and have possession of that ball at midfield? Right, what happens if Clyde Edwards-Helaire doesn't fumble the ball with 30 seconds to go? What happens if Kansas City gets out of the gates 21-0 against the Chargers like they should have if not for turnovers? They dominated the Chargers the first 3 quarters, made them literally feel like little brother the first 3 quarters. What is this spread if Kansas City has a 4-0 in front of their record, which is more like the team they've played down to down?
Yeah, I mean, it's 4.5. I mean, we're talking about moving through not only one key number of 3, but through a secondary number potentially of 4 as well.
So it's really interesting there in terms of price. Obviously, the sharp side has been Buffalo to this point at +3. It'll be very interesting to see if somehow the money line on the Chiefs gets down into that 125, 130 range, if we see a difference of opinion from another group of respected bettors.
Hey, that's what makes the world go around. Not everyone sees games the same way, and despite general consensus sometimes on social media, every sharp guy in the world doesn't get invited to a Zoom meeting or conference call every week so that all of them can bet the exact same side in a game of this magnitude or a total in certain instances. But when you talk about numbers...
No wonder I'm never invited to those. I don't use Zoom.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I've done more, for our listeners out there, when Payne and I talk to a number of folks in the space, potential sponsors and everything else, Payne's the one guy who never puts his video on for Zoom. It's always just audio.
I'm on the phone. It's just audio. I'm just on the phone. I'm moving and shaking.
It's honestly tougher to sell that now. Now that you've committed to the Bet the Board pregame show, it's tougher for you not to have that video component because people do realize you have a camera that works in one of your 37 estates.
Yes, that you're such a that is true. That is true. But it's typically because you're grinding out here 12 to 14 to 16 hours a day. I got some sleep last night, by the way. Yesterday was a foggy, groggy effort as the founder of the Stetson Bennett fan club.
You drew some heat for that. You drew some heat for that.
Butchered his name 3 times. I'm the only guy in that guy's camp. I've contributed the most campaign funds to the Stetson Bennett Foundation. We've obviously broken Georgia games down 300 times at this point. I know his name. However, that's what happens when you operate on about 2 hours and 45 minutes of sleep. Last night, for me, Went to bed about 1:45, woke up at 6:50. I don't know the math on that, but that feels like 5+ hours. I'm ready to roll.
5+
so much chipper, much more animated Payne today.
5+ hours is good this time of year. If we can log those most nights, especially during the midweek work schedule, it is definitely a step in the right direction. But no discussion of numbers would be complete, no matter how eloquently we talk about these games, without inviting in a respected voice from behind the counter. He joins us every week here on the Bet the Board podcast. You, of course, can follow John Sheeran on Twitter at JSheeran. That's JSheeran1981 for all sorts of great sportsbooks insights, even after the podcast comes to a halt. And John, when you look at the way last weekend unfolded in the National Football League, we saw two of the biggest public sides that we addressed last Thursday come home to roost in the Green Bay Packers and, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. But alas, the biggest showdown of all, imagine it was a pretty good result for you guys when Tampa was unable to get themselves outside the number in the elements at Foxborough.
Yeah, like you say, that was the biggest regular season game so far in terms of handle. We saw that, huge bias towards the Brady and the Bucks, and pretty solid stirring performance from the Patriots was enough to make sure that we had another really profitable weekend, and the under staying inside the number and the dog not winning on the money line with the cost of that doink at the end all turned out to be almost a perfect result for us.
Yeah, I was going to say it's always interesting because we know moneyline parlays and teasers have definitely grown in popularity. So it was probably the best case scenario for you guys for the favorite to win and not cover in that particular spot.
Yeah, normally when we get a favorite like that, particularly when it's over a field goal, the people who want the dog will often take the money line on the underdog. So when we get the favorite to win but not cover, especially with the under, it always is really favorable for us.
Go figure, Payne. We'd seen a rash of primetime overs coming home, and as we see all the time, the regression monster always gets the best of recreational bettors with 3 straight unders in Thursday, Sunday, and Monday Night Football.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, John knows this well, and we've been preaching to our listeners over the years, like, this is a market. Everyone obviously loves to bet. Everyone obviously loves to gamble a little bit, and most people treat this like a hobby, but this is a market, and eventually markets adjust, and that's what we've seen in prime time, and really what we've seen the last couple of weeks with a lot of these totals. John, when we shift to week 5, I'll make this concise, I'll make it short and sweet. What are you seeing so far? Anything from the professionals this early in the week? Anything in terms of potentially large decisions for the FanDuel book?
I think the professional money so far, definitely on the Vikings. We saw 7.5 there, which is where our number is. Obviously ballooned almost to 10. I think maybe around right now around 9.5. So that was a pretty sharp move early on in the week that we saw straight away. I think Cincinnati is the other one, obviously off a 10-day bye against the Green Bay Packers, who maybe even in here with a kind of a bit of a letdown spot. We saw money, sharp professional money for the money line on the Bengals and plus 3.5 as well. We actually made it 4. I think we sit at a field goal right now. So they're definitely the two sharper ones. I think tonight's game is pretty interesting from the Bucs perspective. We've seen obviously a lot of volume for the Rams. That line opening at 1, more like 2.5 now. So that'll be a strong one, I think, for the Rams. And then obviously looking forward to Sunday with both the Bills and the Chiefs and the Niners and the Cardinals in particular. I expect Arizona there and probably Kansas City to be quite public, as long as the over in Sunday Night Football as well.
When you look at a game like the Cardinals, John, and I'm glad you mentioned their contests Sunday against the 49ers, we're still not sure at this point on Thursday morning who's going to be under center. For San Francisco, it's a game we just broke down a little bit more extensively. What have you done with the Cardinals' power number overall? Last remaining undefeated team, we've seen how high-flying their offense has been, 30-plus points in every game, 400-plus yards. But I can't imagine odds makers anywhere are truly buying into this team being one of the elites as far as the pecking order is concerned.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Obviously, we've adjusted them up. They've been pretty impressive through the first 4 weeks. So I think that's right and fair and just that you recognize the efficiency offensively. I think we spoke about it last week, and I know Payne spoke about it even further around question marks around how the offense is actually structured. It seems to be working right now, but we only made this 3.5. We will shade for sure the Arizona Cardinals for the rest of the week. Most of the markets are 5.5. I think we're at 5. We just couldn't get this anywhere close to the number that it is right now, and I think that's the point that you're making. Our priors, obviously, with the adjustment not getting to where the market seems to have gotten.
John,
the Arizona Cardinals.
John, let me ask you this: are you operating under the idea that it's Trey Lance under center, and ultimately, what kind of decision have you guys made in the gap between Jimmy G and Trey Lance, if any?
Yeah, I think we spoke about it at the start of the year, how high I am in particular on Trey Lance's ceiling. And, I think it's actually probably going to be a good thing net if we see Trey Lance again. I think, Jimmy G has just got such a big injury history. We know that they didn't really want him in the summer. It's a downgrade on their ratings for sure right now. But I think long term, and maybe even as soon as this week, we might see an explosion of a new star. I'm a huge fan. I think he's, so inexperienced. I think that he's got such room to improve. I think he might be in one of the right places to do that with the coach there. So, downgrade for sure. A lot of upside though, and we'll probably want to side with him this weekend.
Payne, this podcast is going to be damn near impossible to do if we have John as a fanboy of Trey Lance and you as the ultimate fanboy of Kyle Shanahan. I mean, this is going to be a weekly celebration of 49ers football if they can get things going in the positive direction.
Nothing wrong with that, because we did go over their wins at 10, close 10.5. So we're going to need some magic here from those two fellas.
There is no doubt about that. And John, I know it's been a busy couple of days for you on the road. Wasn't sure if there was anything else you've seen through the first couple of weeks, I guess the quarter pull of sorts, that's really surprised you in terms of teams' performances, or maybe disappointed you in the same vein?
I don't know. I mean, there's been so many differences. I think the offense in Dallas have been really excellent. I've been really disappointed with the Chiefs' defense, and I'd be interested. It's not surprising the total's as high as it is in Sunday Night Football. That Chiefs' defense to me looks really, really weak. We see Mahomes having a lot of pressure as well, having to scramble a lot, and we saw what happened in the Super Bowl when that happened. So that might be a good spot for the Bills. A little bit disappointed in the Chiefs, but I won't raise any alarm bells just yet.
He is the best in the business when it comes to offering the odds makers perspective. If there's certain games or questions that you have for John, I always encourage you to hit him up on Twitter at jsheeran1981. John, like I said, I know it's been a long couple of days hobnobbing with some of the executive teams. Go off, get some rest, and best of luck at this NFL Week 5, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Always good, Payne, to get John's perspective on things and to hear him kind of echo some of the same sentiments in regards to a game we broke down earlier between the 49ers and Cardinals.
Yeah, it's always good getting confirmation from sharp minds and ones that you respect, and certainly John not only is an odds maker that sees a ton of information come in from respected bettors, but he also has an opinion of his own, and so everything seems to be meshing and aligning.
That is for sure. And when you talk about aligning, there's still one game left to go. That, of course, the Thursday night showdown. But this is the perfect time to remind all of you, our loyal listeners, go ahead, follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, I know we have a little promotion going as well for folks that go on. Oh, sorry, I know I called it iTunes last time. Apple Podcasts, and they offer up a 5-star review with a corresponding nice note. Do you want to outline those details for some of the folks out there that may not have listened to the podcast earlier this week or last?
Yes. I mean, our goal has always been to take care of the people that take care of us. And so we are obviously not here without the listeners. We do not spend a ton of money marketing this podcast, so we like an organic approach, and that has always been tell a friend, tell a coworker, retweet the podcast, even if you have 19 followers, it doesn't matter. And so we always want to give back, and unfortunately with Apple Podcasts, it's all algorithm-based. So the more subscribers, the more 5-star reviews, that moves you up the charts, and that allows us to compete with all of the big boys in the networks doing it as a mom-and-pop shop. So every couple times a year, we want you to go to Apple Podcasts, hit the 5-star review, leave a nice little comment. If you've done it in the past, you can do it again. I believe it reaggregates every 6 months or so, and we'll have a giveaway. We will take all of the comments in the 5-star section, put them into an automator, and we will pay $100 to 3 people that the automator spits out. But to qualify, you just have to leave a 5-star review and a nice little comment, and you are automatically entered. We'll announce those winners at some point next week. I think my Sunday's going to be a little swamped. I thought Monday, but Monday morning's a little tough. Either Wednesday or Thursday of next week, we'll make that announcement of the 3 winners on the podcast. So that's all you have to do. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review, nice little comment. You're automatically entered. 3 winners, $100 a pop.
One of these days, I'm going to get to see that automator. It's like the black box on an airplane. You don't exactly know what goes on inside of it, but it always has some of the best information available. So
yeah, you just go to a website. It's online. You just throw all the names, copy and paste them into the thing, roll the dice, and hit the button.
Didn't we used to use a hat for that kind of thing back in the day when you were picking teams on the playground and stuff? You throw everybody's names in there and you figure out draft order that way?
Yes, unfortunately, there's 1,500 reviews. If you would like to write all the reviews down on a sheet of paper,
no, we can outsource that. We got a team of team of interns, right? Can we take applications for that for people that want to handle the automator and our giveaways?
There you go.
All right, one final game left to go, and that, of course, is the Thursday night affair between the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. And we've seen this number ping-ponging around all Thursday morning. Number got as high as 3 before there was some market resistance, to say the least, as we're back to 2.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game sits at 54. And, Payne, we're going to have some fun with trends before we get into X's and O's, because I'm going to rattle off stuff just to make people's heads spin. When you look at the Rams, 10-2 against the spread the last 12 primetime games. Sean McVay, 6-3 straight up versus the Seattle Seahawks as Rams head coach, a plus 57-point differential. Following a straight-up loss as head coach of the Rams, Sean McVay has compiled a record of 13-6-1 against the spread for those scoring at home. That's a 65% success clip. That's the best winning percentage following a loss by a head coach since 2000 with a minimum of 10 games. And when you look at the Rams, those numbers get even better since the start of 2019. When they lose a game by double digits, they're 6-0 against the spread in the ensuing contest. But at the same time, there's one thing we've come to expect from Russell Wilson. It's that when the lights are the brightest in prime time, he typically plays his best football. 21-3 straight up at home, 17-6-1 against the number at home in primetime spots, including the playoffs. But this will be the first time Seattle enters a game as a home underdog since the regular season finale of the 2019 season, a game where they came up just inches short against the San Francisco 49ers for the division. Do the Rams bounce back after an anemic performance against the Cardinals, or does Seattle use a pretty fortunate win against the 49ers last weekend to kickstart their season?
Let's start with Russ and the offense against the Rams defense. Ooh, sorry, I caught ADD. That under money that we were talking about potentially hitting the market at the Packers-Bengals game, under 52, just came in. Now down to 51. In this game, obviously, you have 2 struggling units right now. The Rams defense, we kind of projected for that regression, so it's not shocking. The Seahawks offense, we did not. And we outlined Seattle's second half woes the first 3 weeks of the season heading into the 49ers matchup last week, so this might sound a little repetitive, but Seattle's offense was really humming in the first halves of games, right? They were second in down-to-down success rate. They were first in explosiveness. And then that all went out the window against the 49ers, like poof, gone. And I went back last week and I watched the rewind sped up. I watched the all 22 of Seahawks 49ers and then compared it to the data that spit out that I could see on an Excel sheet. And Shane Waldron was, and I'm putting this kindly, terrible in the first half calling plays. There was a stretch of 5 straight 3-and-outs where he used zero motion, where he only had Russ throw once with play action, 80% of the snaps from shotgun. Not good for Waldron in the first half last week. And, you look at some of those numbers in totality, and you hinted at them being very fortunate and them being obviously Seattle. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks offense, 31% passing success rate last week. 5 yards per pass attempt, only 2 explosives. And then you go back to the week prior against the Vikings and how they closed out that game. In the second half of that Vikings matchup, 4.3 an attempt for Russ, 40% success rate, 0 explosives. The last 6 quarters of offensive football, probably the worst from Seattle in the Russell Wilson era. Now, the Rams defense has regressed substantially. We called for that in the preseason. We're seeing it unfold in front of us. This is not Raheem Morris's defense. This is Brandon Staley's defense that Raheem Morris is trying to tinker with, and it's not quite working. Offenses right now are having much more space and room to attack this shell zone defense the Rams are playing. The zones are far more open. They have more space, allowing offense to operate. You obviously lost Troy Hill and John Johnson in free agency. Darius Williams regressed. Ramsey's playing too much in the slot. But I'm not sure if Seattle's got the offense right now, at least not on a 3-day turnaround to fix some of their woes to be able to attack this. We'll have to monitor the Chris Carson situation. It doesn't appear like that's trending well for tonight. That would be a larger loss than usual based upon the Rams' style of defense with light boxes. And you're also going to have a Russell Wilson that through the early part of the season was getting rid of the ball quickly. The last couple of weeks, that's changed a little bit, and he's holding on to it. And the philosophy to beat the Rams is getting the ball out quick and taking those 7-8 yard passes under the shell coverage. And he hasn't really done that the last 2 weeks. So that'll be ultimately the big question here for Seattle's offense is if Chris Carson's out, do you have the backs to be able to attack the light boxes? And is Russell Wilson going to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker and be willing to take the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yard pass and not constantly search and hunt the deep explosive to Lockett or Metcalf?
Are the Rams, in your opinion, able to get enough pressure on Russ? We know that's where he's typically faltered. 84% completion rate this season. When he's got time in the pocket, that falls below 50% when pressured, and the yards per attempt completely falls off the table from 11 to 6.2. And in the 3 meetings last year, the one thing we saw was Leonard Floyd essentially acquainting himself with Russell Wilson multiple times in each of those games. And Aaron Donald, we know 8th in the NFL with 18 pressures, 9 sacks the last 7 games against Seattle. And he's really had a ton of success attacking an undermanned Seahawks offensive line as well.
Yeah, certainly when you get pressure on quarterbacks, that helps, right? That's the whole goal. Make quarterbacks uncomfortable. Aaron Donald, one of the very best doing that from the interior, flushing quarterbacks out. Part of the issues with Russ are what I just mentioned. He's been holding on to the ball a little bit too much in recent weeks, and to some extent, probably a large extent, pressure is a quarterback stat. So if he's able to get the ball out quickly, that will avoid and negate some of that pressure. Obviously, Seattle's offensive line isn't great. That's been a constant concern over the last few seasons. It's why Russ wasn't happy this offseason. So you're not dealing with a great offensive line. Russ is getting up there in age. He's not as quick or as fast as he once was to elude the pressure, and that's why it becomes even more important that he's operating the offense within it and getting the ball out quickly to negate some of that pressure, but also finding receivers open in the underneath to intermediate routes of that shell coverage of the Rams.
Well, we talk about, defensive issues for the Rams. Clearly, the Seahawks have had plenty in their own right, and they'll go up against a Rams offense that I'm sure is looking to rebound a bit. The Rams so far this season have punted just 8 times on the season. Only the Kansas City Chiefs have punted fewer times. And when you look at the Rams passing game, 4th in yards per attempt, 2nd in yards per completion. 42% of the completions for Matthew Stafford this season have gone for first downs. That's top 3 in the league. And Stafford's done a great job protecting the football, just 2 interceptions, but a lot of that is because he's felt comfortable in the pocket, sacked just 3 times through the first 4 games. This is a Seattle defense you talked about, and you used the word disorganized a number of times. Clearly not the kind of offense that you get healthy against if communication is struggling on that back end.
Was that the right word choice? Is it disorganized or is it unorganized? Which is the proper?
Oh, I mean, unorganized, and I mean, you can have a disorganized organization, so that, it's okay in terms of approaching it one of 2 ways.
Okay, beautiful.
I wasn't trying to be an asshole there by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I was just wondering. I think when I look at this side of the ball, we have been really Rams heavy on this podcast. I know the Monday morning after the Colts win, we discussed that game. Then we've had back-to-back weeks of breakdowns against Tampa and Arizona, so I will try to keep this somewhat concise. And I keep coming back to being unsure on how Seattle gets stops here. The Rams are going to be pretty laser-focused, I would think, offensively, especially after a no-show at home last week. The matchup doesn't bode well for Seattle's defense. the Seahawks just don't have any parts, man. Like, the defensive line's regressed. Bobby Wagner appears to be, I hate to say this, is one of the better linebackers of all time, trending down. The secondary's abysmal. And you put it all together and you have a defense that's dead last in first down efficiency. It's really tough to be a good defense if you're not performing on early downs. And, we really dug in depth last week about Seattle, as you mentioned there, looking like they don't really know what they're doing. And that's a concern when you have Ken Norton. He's been there 9 years. And right now, Seattle doesn't really have the defensive parts to run what they're trying to run. The players are trying to do something different because that's their natural instinct, and the system just isn't meshing with the players. And so they've tried hiding Jamal Adams in coverage and with, playing him down at linebacker a little bit more, and obviously with Bobby Wagner dropping off some, that I guess they think makes sense. They downgraded their corners in the offseason, and so that's not really the best recipe for success in 2021, right? Like, Seattle's 26th right now in EPA per dropback allowed, 27th in defensive pass efficiency. They tried starting Sidney Williams last week to mix some things up. Gave up 7 receptions on 9 targets for 170 yards, 7 first downs, and 2 touchdowns. And so, not quite the changeup I think the defense was
not
looking
great,
for.
Clark. Not great.
He was responsible for the bust on the Deebo Samuel touchdown. This is just not a very good secondary. And the parts of the defense, again, don't really mesh with what the coaches want to run. And so you have a defense that's not good on first down or defending passes, and they're going up against a Rams offense 3rd in first down efficiency and number 2 in passing efficiency. I don't think we see a situation where Seattle's defensive woes get rectified in on a 3-day week. And there's also a huge upgrade in caliber of offensive line Seattle's facing here. The 4 offensive lines Seattle's faced to date have an average pass block win rate of 21st. The Rams are 2nd in that category. Carlos Dunlap went down twice in the 49ers game on Sunday. He's playing through a little turf toe issue. Unless the Seahawks offense is so pedestrian that the Rams can kind of park it on the ball, I don't see a situation where the Rams aren't scoring 30-plus here, Todd.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, we talked about last week not being indicative of what you were going to see from the Rams week in, week out. It was a flat spot despite it being their first game played against division competition, and I think that creates a little bit of a sense of urgency in this spot. You do, of course, have playoff revenge working in Seattle's favor. What is interesting about the last 3 meetings between these teams, we've seen 50 points or less scored, 2 of those games coming in well under the total, albeit the playoff games sneaking over with some shenanigans and tomfoolery, whatever adjective you want to use, for the John Wolford Bowl of sorts in that particular spot. But a game where 2 teams really have to go out there and make a statement, and suddenly a torrid start for the Rams goes out the window if they drop back-to-back divisional games despite their 3-0 record and a big win over the Tampa Bay Bucks. Should be a fun watch, and one that I think all of us are looking forward to on a Thursday night, more so than what we've seen in the early going thus far. 5 games broken down as in-depth as we possibly know how to do around these parts. Want to thank John Sheeran, as always, for stopping by, lending his expertise from behind the counter on short rest, given some work obligations and such. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there as well. You can also follow the podcast, most importantly, at BetTheBoardPod, FanDuel.com/BetTheBoard. Make sure you take advantage of their generous new user signups just in time for the most important part of the podcast for a lot of our loyal listeners. Payne, where have we identified a little bit of wiggle room in the market and an investable opportunity for the Week 5 slate?
So we've already broken this game down. I am not going to waste my voice and your time. It will be time-stamped in the description. You can click right to it. We're going with the San Francisco 49ers, rotation 4-7-5. It's a game that we like. This is a game that there's been some confirmation on. Obviously, we had John on as well, who endorses this play. And what I will tell you to do, and this is, again, if you want to listen to the breakdown, hit the timestamp. We broke it down for 15-plus minutes. But what I am doing, and ultimately it's up to you, but what I am doing is playing San Francisco +6 -15 on the bye. The 6 count has become extremely valuable. It is now the 3rd largest key number, We've discussed over the years how it's increased in importance once they moved the extra point back. And it's not just that. We're now in the analytical era where smart coaches understand that if it's late third quarter or at any point in the fourth quarter, if you are trailing by 14 and score a touchdown, you are going for 2 down 8. Your win probability increases by doing that. So that is the other reason for the 6 count having far more value than it once did. And Kyle Shanahan, hopefully we're not in a situation where we're down 14, but you always want to leave yourself an out. And Kyle Shanahan is one of the analytically driven coaches in this league. So if there is a situation where somehow San Francisco is down 14, driving late, gets a touchdown, they will be going for 2 in that situation. So the 6 has become very valuable, and that is what I am doing. You do whatever you want, but that's how I'm approaching this, taking the 49ers plus 6 minus 15.
Oh, I can't wait for all the math folks out there to come into your mentions. That'll make for a field day on Friday morning, but I agree with you completely here. When you talk about the strength of information, I know there's so much of a stigma made around buying points, but when it comes to key numbers in the National Football League, you do what you can to increase your edge, and I think a lot of our listeners who don't have access to some of this same information that you or I do would be blown away when they see some of the buying habits, even when it comes to totals and some of the key numbers out there, to do what you can to put yourself in the best position to cash a ticket in a league with the most efficient markets.
There's no doubt about it. I think there is a lot of misconceptions portrayed,
perfect word choice,
divulged online, I would say, and I don't see that from what comes in and what some of the largest groups and bettors are doing. It doesn't mesh. And I understand if you are a numbers-based math guy and you're working on your own and every single cent matters, there is a different approach when it comes to the largest groups getting the most money down with not just math guys on their team, but with information. And so they always want to enhance that edge. And so I think, here's one, for example. If you can get a game plus 7.5 that's sitting 6.5, and it only costs you 30 cents to move through the 7, that's what groups are doing right now. That's a value to them. And the math guy would just take the 6.5. Now, if you're operating and you're getting reduced juice, right? You're getting minus 105. Becomes a little bit of a different story. If you're dealing in the Asian market and getting minus 103, it obviously becomes a little bit of a different mindset there. But if you're dealing with 6.5 minus 110, there is some value buying that entire point to the 7.5 minus 30. That's kind of what the numbers have divulged recently. So yeah, there's a lot of buying patterns that I think people would be stunned by that are just not portrayed properly on social media these days.
Nope, that's how markets work. It's the sharp guys that typically stay one step ahead, where everybody wants to buy into sometimes an often antiquated narrative. But that's a different discussion for a different day. My apologies for going off on a full-blown tangent. The reality of it is the 49ers will win the game outright on the football field on Sunday and make all of this a moot point. For Payne Insider, I am Todd Furman. Best of luck with all of your NFL Week 5 investment opportunities. Again, Apple Podcasts, 5-star review, write a little write-up. You'll have a chance to win $100 absolutely risk-free, no strings attached. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell people you hate, tell your mailman. Encourage folks to download and listen to the Bet the Board podcast. And come Sunday afternoon, they can join all of us with a ticket on the San Francisco 49ers, and we'll see them at the window.